Namaste and a warm welcome to our Democracy Day discourse here on NTV. I'm Shivanee Thapa Bosnath with you, and today, marking this occasion, we are making this effort in a bid to take a pause to reflect not just on the journey of democracy in Nepal, but on its deliverance to the public. Beyond the rhetoric, beyond the promises that were made, has democracy truly met the people's aspiration? Has it strengthened public service? Has it uplifted well-being and justified the sacrifices made in its name? Nepal's democratic evolution, as we all know, has been marked by both triumph and turbulences. But after decades of political transformation, economic restructuring and institutional reform, the fundamental question still remains: has democracy worked for the people? And now, to dissect the critical inquiry, we are joined in by two very eminent figures who have closely been, as well as have had a very important role in shaping Nepal's political and economic landscape. Dr. Yuba Khatiwada, a distinguished economist himself, as well as a former finance minister, and Dr. Minendra Rijal, a former communications minister, as well as a seasoned politician. A very warm welcome to both of you to the studios.
Thank you very much.
Thank you one more time from the entire NTV family for your very valid presence herein. So as we commemorate the ideals of democracy today, let me ask and let me begin with Dr. Rijal. What is democracy in Nepal a story of progress, or is it a promise unfulfilled?
It's a story of progress. I mean, we have changed so much. I mean, if you go back 74 years, today we enter the 75th year of democracy in Nepal, right? With ups and downs in between. I would not go into that right away, but back then we were subjects of Ranas who were reigning the country for 104 years after having usurped power from Shah monarchy. Back then, all that could be raised as revenue in the country used to be deposited in Rana ruler's name. We as a people had absolutely no authority over the revenue that we would pay to the government. First time after 1950, budget, in the real sense of budget, was promulgated in the country. In that sense, from being what you used to be, from subjects of Rana rulers to citizen of this country. I mean, this is a sea change. But at the same time, I hasten to add that there is frustration out there today also. Little more than is justified, but as political people, we cannot shy away from the fact that there is frustration. Frustration basically when people compare ourselves with many other countries, and they probably kind of think that we have not probably made as much strides as we should have done. Yes, that's true in one sense, but at the same time, if you compare to where we were to where we are today, I mean, this is journey into modernity. We joined the community of civilized nations back in 1950, and we are part of that civilization in the world today.
Dr. Khatiwada, what are your personal reflections on how far democracy has delivered in uplifting the lives of people?
Well, just building on what Dr. Rijal has said, I'm not going back to the year, when democracy was just set up after doing away with the Ranas. Let me come to the point from where truly democratic exercise started to begin. It was 1990. From 1990 onwards, we have faced several opportunities and challenges in the country as such. There has been regime change, there have been shocks, there have been disasters, but the progress has taken place to our satisfaction, a bit maybe lower than people's expectation. Couple of things are important. First, we have really empowered people. Voice and accountability has gone up. we have governments, duly elected governments taking place, ruling the country. The only thing we are perhaps not so happy is with the speed of progress we made in our economic front, particularly in economic development and narrowly speaking on the growth perspective. But having said that, I would also like to re-emphasize that democracy and development are reinforcing each other. We are not talking democracy at the deficit of development. So we have to make them reinforcing each other. So time has come that coming from our assurance of our political rights, we should now move to empowering people in their economic rights. And the job of the present day government is to see that the fundamental rights of the citizens are met, basic deprivation is over, and the citizens really enjoy the civil and political rights. They have been empowered through the political changes. So I can see that happening now, but it cannot be done overnight. It takes some time.
Right, right. So let's streamline this discussion a bit. Dr. Rijal, democracy promised economic growth and prosperity to the people. Yes. I think this has been at the core of the promises that we've made, and especially as the major stakeholders, that was what was made to the people. Yet if you just pan through the scenario around us right now, Nepal's economy remains very, very fragile. Dissect, GDP growth looks erratic, poverty certainly persists, and then structural reforms lag, right? So have political parties truly worked to uplift the lives of people in this scenario?
I mean, when you say it could have been better, I cannot disagree with you, but at the same time, let's have a sense of proportion also. I mean, if we go back to 1990 only, our revenue, government revenue has increased by 100 folds, not percentage, 100 folds. GDP has increased by 49 folds. Per capita income has increased by 26 folds. And then you probably will say, well, price level also has gone up. Yes, it has gone up from 1 to 10. So even if you factor that in, then economy has in real terms also expanded by 10 folds. GDP, revenue expanded by 10 folds. GDP expanded by almost 5 folds, and per capita income almost somewhere between 2.5 to 3 folds. That's a tremendous achievement. In terms of longevity, life expectancy at birth in 1990 was 54 years, and in just about 30 plus years, it has increased by 17 years to 71 years. Maternal mortality somewhere around 850 per 100,000 pregnancy. Today it's somewhere between 150 and 200. Child mortality, infant mortality. I mean, you can talk about any. I mean, you can talk from almost universal literacy from where we were back then. Almost universal access to electricity, universal access to sanitation, universal access to drinking water. Almost universal, I'm saying, from non-existent services back then. I mean, that's feat of accomplishment. Compare that with achievements of any other country in the world. We've done pretty good, but at the same time, should we not have done better? Of course we should have done better, especially after we promulgated the Constitution 9 years back. I mean, expectations were so high because we're coming out of having resolved the armed conflict and put back democracy back on track, and having promulgated the Constitution, for which we fought for a long time, long and arduous struggle for that. Expectations are very high, and in today's world, when people have very easy access to what's going on, information to what's going on around the world, of course, we probably should have done better. We have not yet been able to put our acts together. I mean, there is something that needs to be done to change the pace in which we are moving, but at the same time, I guess we are probably one of the freest country in South Asia. If you look at the press freedom index, I mean, compared to any other country in South Asia, we're pretty good in terms of democracy within political parties, competition between political parties, among political parties. I mean, we're pretty good by any standard. But can it be done? Can it be made better? Of course, it could be, and that's precisely the reason why you and I and you and us, we are I've sat down here and are talking about on the 75th year since democracy, how are we going to move from here? Can we change something? Can we take it to a different level? That probably should be the narrative today. That probably is the expectation of people, and the frustration out there is also because they have kind of doubts on us if we be able to put our acts together.
Right. Despite having agreeing to this very positive scenario that Dr. Rijal just put, Dr. Khatiwada, still there is so much discontentment in the public scenario, right? Not many people look very content with how the political parties have delivered. So, Dr. Khatiwada, as an economist, maybe you are in a better position to tell us, how do you assess the role of political parties in stabilizing and destabilizing the democratic framework?
Well, thank you for this question. First, I was hearing this morning that in the last 34 years, there have been 30 governments. Governments keep on changing in democracy. That's a normal process. If they change so frequently, that's the major concern. Second, democracy versus some other kind of political system doesn't have a differential impact on growth and development. The differential impact comes from the leadership. So the basic issue now boils down to how our leadership have been, they are evolved over time in the course of democratic institutionalization. That is important aspect. I don't think there have been any kind of policy departures or retreat in the policies that have detracted the political process of the country, except for the Maoist movement, a decade of armed revolt by the Maoist, which was a kind of retreat or a kind of, I would say, backlash to the whole democratic process. After that, there have been changes of governments. Whosoever comes in government, they follow the constitutional norms, they follow the basic economic reforms, and they now have to adhere to the principles of the Constitution, meeting fundamental rights of the citizens and following the directive principles of the state as enshrined in the Constitution. So, and in economic front, it's basically the reform process going on. The only difference is the speed. Some government might like to have a slower pace of reforms, others might like to have in a bit faster way. That's the only difference. But the basic thing is to meet the basic aspirations of the people. The aspirations are sometimes out of reach of the resources. As we see in our country, resources are limited as compared to our aspirations. And there is nobody to blame except for ourselves, the political process, who raise their expectation beyond our capacities to cope in the short time. So, now the issue is that we should not be raising expectation of the people beyond we can cope, or beyond our resources can match, or beyond what we can utilize through our own domestic resources, because we are now talking about self-sufficiency and independent economic policies, and then we have to also realize that we do have to restrain our aspirations to the level that they are achievable. So I think that's the imbalance between aspiration and our commitment.
Right. I can clearly see that both of you agree with the political parties, despite their performance, their will, and the pledge they have towards democracy. The instability factor and the frequent change in government has really paid a toll on the delivery side, right? And we very much come to believe that the major effect had been on the governance part. Let's switch to that topic, because democracy was expected, what we expected as public was democracy to strengthen governance, uphold the rule of law, and then ensure transparency in the day-to-day procedures, or at least at the public delivery side, which largely is felt is not being achieved, or not being felt on the public side. The major challenges, what we see is the institutional inefficiency. There is human rights concerns, and also primarily political influence. These have been a few among the major concerns on the public side. So, Dr. Rijal, how do you assess Nepal's progress in these areas? Has democracy met its promises on the governance side?
That's a very valid question. I mean, had we done extremely well? had everything been nice and dandy, it would not have made any sense for NCM and UML, his party and my party, to come together and form a government. We have recognized that something needs to be done. I mean, the other side of the story that I didn't talk about earlier is every day 2,000 people leave this country. The moment they fly out of the country, they feel that a very, very bright future is awaiting for them. Probably a very bright future does not await them, but at the same time, the feeling of sigh of relief on aircraft taking off. And is that not our making? Of course, it's our making. And so do not be thinking about how we seize upon this and move the country in the direction that people would like to see us move. Of course, that's precisely what it is we should be doing. And then one of the things that has created trouble since we promulgated a new constitution is governance is a problem, but the biggest loose end, I would say, is because no single party with the given electoral system can get outright majority or anything close to a majority. And once you don't have a majority, then what happens is politics becomes very transactional. This is precisely what has happened in the last two elections. I mean, alliances formed, alliances broken, alliances formed, people walking in and out of alliance, and I guess for us, we see constantly changing government, constantly, even if it's the same person as the Prime Minister, the composition of government changes so quickly. I mean, and then if you look at us from people's perspective, it seems like when three leaders are taking turns to become Prime Minister for the last 9 years. I mean, that's quite frustrating, and that's precisely the reason why NC and UML have come together. We promised that we'll amend the constitution on number of issues, including electoral system, governance, investigation of abuse of authority, how that's going to go, how federalism can be made more effective, how oversight mechanism can be created, how some of the provisions that has not worked well can be amended, how appointments to the commissions and judiciary can be made so that people feel confident that right people are in the right place. These things, but to do that, we have not yet been able to. I have to be very frank on this one, that we have not yet been able to generate confidence in people. And for that, first order of business of this current government is to rein in the frustration that's there, instill some hope, and hope gradually, once we start moving in the right direction, that will transform into change, into metamorphosis, into hope morphing into confidence creating a situation where we can open a space for public discourse and dialogue for constitutional amendment. Before the next election we can get there. So I mean, yes, there are difficulties despite all the achievements we've made in the past, but that's precisely what the message today has to be. Yes, because of the frustration there are people who are trying to fish in the dirty water. We have to be able to rise up to those challenges also. So I mean, if you ask me, I mean, are we not very aware of what's going on? Yes, we are. Have we not, should we not mend our ways? Of course we should mend our ways, but at the same time, the achievements of last 75 years, especially last 35 years, and even more importantly, since the new constitution has been written, these are achievements of feat of accomplishments compared to any other country in the world.
Right. So we are holding this conversation at a time when certainly the state is considering the constitution amendment, but still the thoughts and perspectives of all the parties have not been so clear to the public at the moment. You so rightly mentioned the electoral system reform process. So what would your say be on the need of electoral system reform, which has been so rife in the political fraternity since a long time now?
I don't want to be too long on this one, but I mean, on a quick note, the current system with 165 constituencies from where members of parliament, members of the House of Representatives are returned directly, and 110 from the PR side. as long as that continues, and with the level of support that NC and UML have, or any party commanding as much support as NC and UML have historically commanded, none of the parties can have a majority, outright majority. So what we need to do is keep the inclusive part of the PR intact. What we can do then is move PR from downsize PR from 110 to 60. 60. Why do I need a seat in PR? I can just compete on the first past the post side. Dr. Khatiwada can just go and compete on the first past the post side. Right? And even Shivanee, for that matter, you can also go and compete on the first past the post side. The people who enter politics are new to politics, professional people, others like you. If we would like to bring you into politics, National Assembly is there. That's how National Assembly came into being after 1990. So there are rooms for that also. So downscale PR from 110 to 60, and what that does is only those who cannot compete on a fair basis, on an even level, will get reservation on the PR side. Rest will have to compete on the fast past the post side. If we do that, NC or EML, whoever is stronger in that particular election, can win anywhere from 75 to 90 seats, and then add 20-25 on the PR side, would be outright majority or very, very close to a majority. That's precisely where we want to move. And there are many other things on the constitutional amendment, but for that we are not yet ready. We have to instill confidence in people. We have to be able to rein in and then bring other parties also into conversation. Public discourse has to be there. Sufficient consensus has to be there when we want to amend the constitution. So that's a tall order, but we have to deliver on that also.
Agreed on that. Dr. Khatiwada, do systematic issues hinder good governance? What is your say on that?
Well, currently there should be no any systemic issues that might have effect on our governance. First, as you are talking about the institutional process of good governance, let me recall the kind of political transition we have faced during the last 3 decades. Of the 3 decades, 2 decades were a protracted transition period. And governance is not only reforming government and making government a delivering entity. It's more to do with the judiciary, it's more to do with the social system and so many things. We were so much engaged in formulating our constitution for almost a decade. And then after that, as Dr. Rijal is speaking, a kind of a parliamentary process took time to formulate some of the laws. That's why some of the fundamentals to improve governance are the legal backgrounds, which took some time to begin the critical reforms. We agree to that. But along with that, I think there are several other reforms to be made, like in the social institutions. We have done a lot of reforms in terms of amending the civil codes and other laws, but still we have to enforce them. This is one. There are issues raised with judiciary reforms which are still incomplete. The other issues are related to implementation of federalism. How do we really materialize the true implementation of federalism, which often is questioned in the context of lack of proper legislation to empower subnational governments in that regard. And again, that comes down to the effectiveness of the parliament to deliver laws and the role of the government to deliver bylaws. So we have to strengthen our focus now. The joint government is an opportunity to show majority and also to advance reforms, the critical reforms which are helpful to implement federalism, institutionalize the federalism process, and then make social and political reforms accordingly. On electoral reforms, Dr. Rijal has definite numbers in his mind. He didn't speak now, but he has numbers already. So we already have started having dialogue on this. We are engaged in this process. But electoral issue is only one aspect of the whole political and electoral reform. the coalition culture and convergence of political parties in major political and economic issues matters more than just getting majority, because we have seen majority governments also not sustaining their full term. So the political culture and also better understanding between parties on the core course of development would be critical in the coming days to also institutionalize the governance process. That's what I think.
The recent coalition culture, as you rightly mentioned, both of you, has been at the spotlight because this has been questioned and has raised so much skepticism in the public as to what it exactly is serving. Although the UML and Nepali Congress have of late come with a lot of pledge and promises to the people about the real nationalistic interest this coalition is serving. This is a topic, the coalition culture. If you just look around the world, there is no denying that the future certainly is coalition. Without coalition, we do not see any democracy prospering. But what would be your message to the political players as to which road should the Nepali political players pursue in terms of coalition culture? Because so far what we have seen is they're serving their own interest and the interest of the time that brings to the political parties. So how would it be serving democracy and the people?
It's so simple. First, have your convergent views, or you have converging opinions in some of the national issues. How would you like to take the country in terms of deepening democracy and institutionalizing governance? How would you like to evolve your foreign policy over time and your relation to our neighboring countries? How would you like to mobilize the private sector for development and trigger the growth process faster? And how would you like to honor human rights and the civil rights of the citizens? Just to make a minimum agreement on 4 or 5 fundamental issues, then work on that. There might be differences between parties on this and that, but the core issues of the state, if they agree on, the coalition can run, even if we are not able to amend the constitution for kind of getting majority in the parliament. So basic understanding between parties is the case. And I am confident that the converging policies between major 2 parties, economic and political, would give a better shape to that regard. I think that should be running in the coming days.
Amidst all these realities, Dr. Rijal, I think from we started from restoration of democracy in 1990, and now while we are at a very infant stage of a federalism, a federal state, which is so much evolving. There are so many pressing issues facing the political parties themselves. The party system already remains very volatile. Federalism is evolving, and then constitutional implementation has also been tested. So we are amidst all these what you call the major concerns that are facing the democratic system itself. So are these pillars functioning as intended? What would you say as one of the major stakeholders of democracy? Or do you think there are some urgent reforms needed?
Let me put it this way. 74 years ago, King Khatiwada, after democracy was established in the country, make an announcement that Constituent Assembly, election to the Constituent Assembly will be held and the Constitution will be promulgated by the Constituent Assembly. From there until 1990, we could not really move there. First general election in 1959, Nepali Congress had outright majority, 2/3 majority. That government could not last for more than a year and a half. King took over and then put him in prison for 8 years without any charge, anything. And from there it took another 30 years to restore democracy. We restored democracy, and then hardly 6 or 7 years had gone by. Maoist insurgency started, and Maoist insurgency was so intense at a point of time when then King Minendra thought, he could do better than political parties. He tried his hand, he burned his fingers, I would say. And then from there, we kind of negotiated peace with the Maoist, and with the internal constitution promulgated, moved to the constitution. And from 2015, expectations are very high. If you asked me to reflect back to those days. At that time, I very strongly felt that a party like NC or EML both cannot be together in government. One has to be in the government, the other has to be in opposition. A very strong government and very strong opposition. And then from there, I've come to a point where I started advocating, even before NC and EML had formal talks, that NC and EML have to come together. There's so much frustration out there. Some of it justified, some of it not justified. And then if we do not do this, I mean, and if this situation continues for too long, we probably are headed for an accident. That's what I thought, and I still believe that. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, so we have to understand the level of challenge that we're facing today. But how that came into being, since 2015, politics has become very transactional. I mean, anybody can shake hands with anybody else, and then any party can form a government with any other party. Any prime minister can form a coalition with any other political parties. You run as one alliance in the election, you come back and form a government with another alliance, and then that also you would not keep for too long. And for people, I mean, this has become too transactional. And then who is accountable for this? I mean, no one's accountable, because I mean, if you say you are the prime minister, are you not accountable? Then he will turn to you and say, well, I was prime minister for 9 months, and then something changed, and then I was not prime minister anymore. So there's plenty of blame to go around. But I mean, this has to cease. If this does not cease, corruption's not going to reduce. If corruption's not going to reduce, the level of frustration that's out there, it's not going to go away. So I mean, I feel I can take pride in what we've been able to achieve in last 74 years, especially in last 30 years, and more so in last 9 or 10 years also. But at the same time, with all that in mind, we have to be able to rise up to the challenge. That's precisely the reason why NC and EML have come together. This is not time to pat our back. This is not time to be very self-righteous. This is time to understand the challenges and live up to them.
Certainly, since we've been so much exposed to a prolonged transition, right? All the Nepali and all the systems and institutions it has. So we are certainly dealing with, part and parcels of everything that has come by. So that certainly adds a lot of complexities and confusion at all sectors. So Dr. Khatiwada, what is your say? Has federalism added layers of complexity without any tangible results?
Well, I think less than a decade of federalism in implementation, and I think it's premature to say that the federalism hasn't delivered. We have to wait and see its functioning for another decades. The second issue is, let's see federalism in terms of service delivery. Particularly localizing development, prioritizing local development, addressing poverty, coping with disasters, and making local people's demand met at the very local level. If the same service delivery had to take place at the district headquarters, some people might have to travel the whole day, or maybe a couple of days, or many more days, to get small services that they are now getting at their doorstep and close to their household. So the reduced household cost we should also factor in while we are talking about federalism being expensive. What I see currently is that we are simply looking at the budgetary numbers, the administrative expenses that has been made on implementation of federalism, and criticism based on those kind of things, not necessarily going into the service delivery aspect, how people have access to basic services close to their doorstep. That's important. The second issue is that the local governments and to some extent even the provincial government have been able to raise more resources. You can see that the revenue of some of the palikas or municipalities have gone up manyfold in the last 4 or 5 years' time. This is because they have been mobilizing their resources based on the potential they can grab. So we can see resource mobilization, we can see service delivery, But at the same time, we should not be giving a very clean sheet to what's happening in some quarter of the same federalism implementation. That's basically replication, a repetition of the same kind of institution, sometimes not following fiscal norms, and sometimes perhaps being not very rational in terms of allocating resources and making decisions. This is some area where we have to make improvements, but definitely federalism is delivering. We could do much more to make it more delivering in coming days. But I am happy that it's getting its result.
Right. It's a matter of time, and it would take some time for evolution, right? Let's look at the bigger picture, Dr. Rijal. What do you have to say about Nepal's global standings in terms of strengthening democracy? How far have we come?
Here again, I mean, there are two stories. One, we are fortunate enough. I mean, there are hardly many countries which are as fortunate as we are in today's world, I mean, situated between India and China. Where else can you be situated? I mean, that's where all the actions are happening. I mean, 10, 15 years down the road, this will be the hub, economic hub, a hub of political power. I mean, India and China together would be in a position to challenge America and West in terms of economy, in terms of many other things. I mean, in terms of strategic significance, we are between these two countries. I mean, we're very lucky. We are very fortunate to do it, to be so. But at the same time, if you are between two giants, then your conduct of foreign policy, your conduct of domestic policy has to have finesse also. That we have not been able to generate, that we have not developed at all. I mean, what we're doing until now is, I mean, we've become too transactional. I mean, governments are changing so constantly, and then you don't have, as a party alone, you don't have numbers. You have to go from, you have to be constantly in a lookout for coalition building opportunities or opportunities to back the coalition that exists on a particular day. And then what we have done is, I mean, very sadly, we are undermining the importance of playing a role. I mean, we're being very balanced in our geopolitical outlook. We are trying to, many times when we say what we say out in public, it seems like we're trying to play one against the other. That's not what we should be doing. Very frankly, India and China, they cooperate. They cooperate in many things. They coordinate in many things. They compete in many things, and they have certain disagreements and discords also. Likewise, we also can benefit from things which both of them will agree, and steer clear of what would be too unacceptable to one or the other. And at the same time, we should also understand the intensity or depth of our relationship on both South and North. South, we've been open with South for such a long time, so our relationship with India cannot be at the expense of our relationship with any other country. And I will add to that that we have not done anything with China that would undermine the importance of paramount significance of our bilateral ties with India. So I mean, we have to be more aware of our situation, opportunities, and the challenges that we face because of that, and be able to capitalize on the opportunities that are there. Instead of doing that, if we be too transactional and try to play favors with one or the other neighbor, then we as leaders of this country will fail this country.
Right. So rightly said, the very fact that we are so geostrategically placed, and then there have been a lot of experiences and learnings for Nepal and all the players in this entire journey, which haven't had been like very favorable on the side of Nepal, right? Just because of our failure to capitalize on this very fact, we have had to suffer a lot in the past as well. And again, let's come to this current scenario when so much is changing around us, owing to the regional political power and political dynamics, and then now the globe is completely transforming. So many newer realities are coming on our face. So with all the learnings, experiences, and now coming face to face with the new global reality, Dr. Khatiwada, what would you say? How would Nepal's democratic institutions leverage human and natural resources to reduce the reliance on foreign aid and remittances? And what key policy shifts would you recommend to drive self-reliance that would only enforce democracy?
Well, first to draw on Dr. Rijal's remarks on how we have to balance our foreign policy. That applies equally to our economic policy and economic diplomacy. Nepal is not currently in a situation just to block all kind of external assistance or external supports. We have yet to wait for some decades maybe to get ourselves self-reliant on financial resources. We might have to take some maybe number of years before we could create jobs in Nepal for all the youth that they are being abroad. So remittance would continue to play a critical role in coming years. The only issue is how those remittances could be utilized by the households, not by the government. There is a confusion. It's their money. The government has to create an enabling environment. If they want to save in financial instruments, we should provide them attractive and sufficient financial instruments. If they want to invest in productive areas, we have to create an enabling environment for their investment. And if they want to consume, we should provide an opportunity for them to consume the domestic goods and pay taxes. So the remittance economy, for the time being, you cannot simply avoid the whole process. But over time, we should reduce that dependence on migrant workers' remittance through creation of jobs within the country. And now the job market is shifting from traditional kind of unskilled work to skilled and kind of technology related kind of things. So we have to reskill our labor force and make our labor grab the opportunity provided by the economy. Currently, our jobs created within the country are grabbed by somebody else. That's also a part of the story. So we have to see that the jobs so created are absorbed by the Nepali citizens. That is important. On the aid environment, we have been listening a lot of rumors about some countries are doing away with the kind of grants or whatever. I think this is not our choice anyway. We have to live on our own. Borrowing is our choice, but getting grant is not necessarily our choice sometimes. So now we have to gradually get rid of those things. Anyway, we are graduating from LTC. The grant element is coming down anyway. So on our priority, on our productive area identification, we should be using external fund with technology, of course, finance and technology for some time to come. We cannot shut down that window at all, but we should gradually reduce dependence on foreign resources. Should we be able to raise our growth and also raise our revenue base and control leakages in our revenue mobilization, also use our natural resources to the larger extent. That applies to forest, agricultural and water resources.
Right. So if you could only build on this, and as we approach towards the very end part of this conversation, let me touch on the youth, because they are the future and they are the ones who are going to carry forth this institutional building. And if you perceive what they are saying, Nepal's youth certainly have become increasingly very vocal about political issues these days, more than ever. Maybe it could be the impact of social media or something, but we can see a lot of voice from the youth side. But there's also a sense of disillusionment with the political system when we talk about the youths, right? So what can be done to re-engage the youth and ensure that they feel the sense of ownership over Nepal's democratic future? If I may begin with you, and then I'll come to Dr. Rijal.
Well, we have to demonstrate. We have to demonstrate development. We have to demonstrate good governance. And we have to tell by our action that democracy delivers to youth, to women, to marginalized, and to everybody, because that's the best system in so far as we have seen in the world. So there is no alternative to this. The only alternative is to strengthen the existing system. The concern of the youth that they have been disillusioned, they are raising voices. they should not forget that this opportunity has also been created by the democratic system that was created with the sacrifice of so many people in the past. So, this is not a free gift to anybody. So, they should really internalize the whole process, and they should be leading the process now, the political process. If something went wrong with the elder generation, they should come up and take over the older generation and drive the whole development process, the political process. But you cannot simply be disappointed and run away from the opportunity that is bestowed upon you. So, this is challenge to youth, perhaps as also an opportunity for them to take over to the older generation and drive the country in a new dimension. So, it is up to them. They don't have to blame anybody else.
Right, Dr. Rijal.
Yes, there are challenges, but I mean, let's also have sense of proportion. I'm trying to say that so many times. One more time I would do that. 60 years back when I was a child, I could not go to his district from my district headquarters. We are adjoining districts. I could only go on foot, otherwise I had to go to India to travel to his district. That's precisely how I reached Bhadrapur for the first time in my life. From there to where we are today, that's a sea change. But at the same time, level of frustration. Yes, if we say there's no frustration, if we say we should not be engaging with the youth, then we basically are saying that there is absolutely no rationale for NC and UML to come together and form a government. So the largest, biggest order of the thing today is political parties, if they are political parties, if we are political parties, we should be starting meaningful conversation at the grassroots level with youth of this country. They're impatient. They certainly deserve better. Even whether they are mindful of the fact how much struggle earlier generations have gone through, that's a material for them. For them, I mean, the future that awaits for them is more important. So we have to tell them the old stories also, but at the same time, we have to be able to generate faith, confidence in them, and for that, political parties should not be working the way they are working today. If we are political parties, we should be able to, NC and UML, if they cannot hold conversation at grassroots level, then what good are we as parties of the country, right? We have to be able to do that. We have not started doing that. We have formed a government. We have numbers. Nobody can change the government. But if we do not start a meaningful conversation with youth of this country, then for others this will be a firewall that they cannot cross. And if everybody perceives this is a firewall NC and UML have created, they have all the incentives to break the firewall. People from all hues and colors might come together to break to take the firewall down. For that reason, NC and UML have to understand this cannot be firewall to stay in power. This has to be a position of comfort to be able to deliver. Governance has to improve. People are not liking what they are seeing, and if we do not admit that governance has suffered, we'll be fools not to. In the last 7 years, I mean, because of politics taking the shape of transactional politics, youth have become more frustrated. That has to change, and that's precisely how NC and UML should go about.
Thank you. In summing up today's dialogue, it's so evident even from this very, I wouldn't say we were not able to really dissect into everything in depth. However, we could certainly touch on the elements of how we could bolster the institution of democracy in Nepal. So it's quite evident from what you have just said that Nepal democracy has certainly brought about very substantial transformative changes in the country, basically politically change that certainly has served broader goals of sustainable development, equitable economic development. Still, there are these elements certainly remain a little elusive, but that is just a matter of time, and we should reach there if there is commitment from all the stakeholders. Gaps certainly persist between the democratic ideals that we live by and their practical realization. So as we look to the future, the critical task certainly is to ensure that the democratic institutions evolve to effectively meet the needs of the people. And I think this is what people are desperate and looking forward to at this moment. So thank you so much, Dr. Khatiwada, and thank you so much, Dr. Rijal, for your very, very invaluable inputs and your expert views that you've shared, for your profound insights as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shivanee.
To our viewers, thank you so much for engaging with us for this conversations marking the Democracy Day discourse. And the onus certainly lies on both the policymakers and the citizens themselves as well to drive some meaningful reform and translate the aspirations into tangible outcomes for Nepal's democracy. Goodbye from this conversation. Namaste.